YouTube. What is up, James? MTG Biggie here, and today I am back and I'm talking about the banned and restricted announcement that is happening tomorrow. And this is just going to be a quick video of my predictions, and we'll find out very soon whether or not I'm right or wrong, or what I am thinking about has proven to be true. Some of you will be seeing this having already known this information because you're watching this in the future from this moment right now, and you've seen what happened and what the ban restricted announcement update entailed and where we're at now because of it. So for those who caught this on day one, today on Sunday, January 20th, 2019, let's have a discussion down below what you guys think is going to happen tomorrow, whether what I'm about to say is correct or not. And those who are watching this in the future, already knowing what happened, was I right? I don't know. Let me know down below. And what does the format look like now? What does Magic overall look like now with these changes that have been made, apparently? So first and foremost, I'll go through all the formats, and I have some theories, and I'm going to kind of discuss these theories based on probability that I think they're going to happen. And there are several different scenarios that I think can take place, and I think one that definitely will. But the obvious starting point is always at the very not surprising no changes to any format. That's generally what we want to see when Magic and the formats of Magic are in their healthiest spots. So if tomorrow we get the updates, obviously through social media, our phones, or we go seek them out via Wizards' website, and we see no changes have been made, it must mean that Standard and Modern and Legacy and Vintage and Pauper and even Commander are all in a great healthy place. Magic is perfect and no changes are necessary. Well, we know that's not true. Some of these formats are in great shape and even better than they have ever been, or have been in a long time. But some of these formats are broken. So there is the default of no changes, and I think that's very possible. I don't know that it's probable, but I think it is a possibility. So we'll start with, I'm going to save, actually, most interestingly, Standard for last, because I have a very tinfoil-y hat sort of theory about Standard going forward. We'll start with Legacy. Legacy is perfect, I think. I think the format is great. It's diverse. It's fun. It's interactive more so than it's been in a long time. There are combo decks out there, but the combo decks can be interacted with, and the control decks are in a spot as to where they're not terribly controlling. They're not oppressively good like Miracles used to be, but they exist between Grixis control and Miracles, and Death and Taxes being more of a control deck than an aggro deck most of the time. Control is good and interactive and fun. The combo decks are solid, not oppressive, not overbearing. Storm is not everywhere, but there are combo decks that lean on, like the Dark Depths combo with Thespian Stage or Vampire Hexmage, that are also slower interactive combo decks, and it makes for interesting gameplay. And then there are a whole host of mid-rangey sort of interactive decks that lead to a lot of fun and interactive, interesting gameplay that involve a lot of choice making. Legacy is great. No changes are needed there. There's not going to be any changes to Legacy, let's be honest. Vintage, I think this is the sort of no one cares format as far as bans and restrictions are going. Very few people play Vintage. Very few people can afford to play Vintage. Those that do are a very dedicated group, and I wish I was one of them. But by and large, overall, the overarching community just doesn't have access to vintage like some people do. And thus, the microscope with which it is looked at by Wizards of the Coast isn't very tuned into that format. So I think it's likely there are no changes. I know some people within the vintage community think that Paradoxical Outcomes a card that could be restricted. That's a possibility, but I don't think changes are probable at all. So that takes care of that. Pauper is on the rise. Pauper is a real format. It is starting to slowly gain real support from Wizards of the Coast. They just announced that there is going to be a Pauper PTQ coming up at a GP in the very near future where you can qualify for the Pro Tour or the Mythic Championship via Pauper. Foil is a card that was recently put into Pauper that I think does some busted things. So that is a possibility of something that can be banned from Pauper. I'm not sure it will be until it actually becomes a problem. I think it is now just a problem in the it's possible that this is going to be a problem sort of sense, but not actually a problem. It's a let's keep an eye on this and watch what happens sort of problem, and not a this is ruining a format problem yet. So I don't think changes will be done there. Modern's the format that everybody wants to talk about, everybody wants to get into. So now we've got the other formats out there. I'm not going to talk about Commander because honestly, Commander groups control themselves and patrol their own sort of rules and interactions and play group basic house rules for that format, so it's not relevant. But Modern is what everybody expects will be changed, and in the grand scheme of things overall with Magic the Gathering, Modern is the least healthy format in the game. It's the only format where people are complaining about issues and problems and decks and interactions and fun or lack thereof. And it's the only format with which there are changes needed, I believe. Obviously, no changes is the default, but if there are going to be some changes, there's a few different routes that it could go. First and foremost, KCI. That deck is very good, and it's getting very much press, like a whole ton of press and a whole ton of bad press, because it is becoming more and more hard to interact with and more dominating over the format. It put up 4 decks out of the top 8 recently at the GP, I believe in Oakland, and since then it's gaining a ton of popularity, and the deck is very resilient and very good, and very leads to very bad gameplay and very bad, uninteractive, uninteresting Magic as far as viewing is concerned. So that's a deck that's probably public enemy number 1 for a change. Now there is do you ban a piece of it that enables the deck a lot, like Ancient Stirrings, like Mox Opal, something like that? Do you nerf and ban a less notorious but more of a niche, very specific enabler like Scrap Trawler, something that won't affect other decks if you ban it, will only nerf but not completely neuter the deck and make the deck still playable but have to adjust? Or do you just nuke it from the top down and go for the namesake Krark Clan Ironworks and just take the KCI out of KCI? Personally, I think that's how you do it. I think you just take the card out. You leave Ancient Stirrings alone. You leave Mox Opal alone. These cards have their own set of problems outside of this deck. But honestly, it would kind of do a lot to other decks in the format that people love and enjoy and that aren't dominating right now. So I think if you nuke it and just take out the head and the body will fall sort of mentality with that deck, that's what I would do if I were in charge of making decisions. And I had a say in it. Beyond that, there is concern with other decks in the format. It's not just KCI. Since Arclight Phoenix has become a thing, that deck is very, very good. And a lot of people are shifting over to that strategy, and I feel like there is a smaller yet very vocal minority of people who think something from that deck needs to go because that deck is becoming too popular, it's too good, or at least too widely represented now. It seems like everybody and their mom is switching over or moving toward these Arclight Phoenix combo decks with Thing in the Ice and a bunch of cantrips and a bunch of efficient spells to try to abuse Arclight Phoenix. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think that deck is the best deck in the format. I don't think it is going to be an ongoing problem. It's just a deck that people need to adjust to. I don't think it's been around long enough to have been adjusted to and to have been figured out how to play against and how to combat it. I think there are a percentage of modern players who kind of figured out that, well, if your opponent is jamming all this Arclight Phoenix nonsense, the default way to beat them is just to be faster than them. So a lot of people are moving to Burn, which I think is great. I think anytime that Burn becomes the answer to the problem deck, the format's fine. The problem deck isn't that big of a problem deck to begin with if Burn is how you beat it. So I think Arclight Phoenix is fine. It'll be around for a little bit. It'll be popular. It's going to be kind of like Death Shadow was. It'll be the best thing you could be doing for a little while, and then it'll kind of recede back into the middling level of decks in the format where it's going to be around because it's good, but it's not going to be the best thing to be doing for a long time. Much like Bant Spirits was for a little bit, and Humans, it's going to be like the best thing to do for a little bit, then it's going to dial back and just get down to reasonable numbers. Humans is a deck that people were like, oh, you got to ban something. So is Death Shadow. And then there's the Evergreen Bantron people, which I never have understood. So that's how Modern is looking right now as far as banning cards goes. On the flip side, there are a number of cards that you could possibly consider unbanning in Modern to just throw them out there because honestly, they're not going to break a format the way that they would have a couple years ago. And the format has become so hyper efficient and so fast and so linear and focused and driven that cards like Stoneforge Mystic aren't going to have as big of an impact as people think they are. Much like Bloodbraid Elf and Jace when they were both unbanned last year, or the year before at this point, I think. Stoneforge is fine for Modern. Stoneforge is healthy for Modern. I don't think you can unban Stoneforge plus Umezawa's Jite, as much as I would love that as a Death and Taxes guy. I don't think you can unban both, but Stoneforge isn't a problem. Getting a turn 3 Batterskull online or going and searching out a Sword of Fire and Ice or whatever it may be is very powerful but very slow. And when you're getting hit in the face for 9 by 3 Arclight Phoenixes on turn 2 or 3, who cares? Like, so what? Stoneforge Mystics around. I think it's fine to unban it, and I think it's the most likely candidate to be unbanned. And I'd be very excited for it to be unbanned because I love that card. I love that style of gameplay that it allows, a very powerful and interactive sort of deck. And that's how I like to play Magic. The less likely, much less likely to be unbanned, but I think more important if it were unbanned and more significant if it were to be unbanned is Splinter Twin. There are a contingency of folks, much like myself, that think that card never should have been banned in the first place, and that Splinter Twin ultimately makes Modern healthy because it is the police that kind of watch over and take care of the format and make sure that nothing too degenerate is happening for fear of Splinter Twin. It's obviously has been called the boogeyman of the format. It lurks around and is there, and if you don't respect it and you just try to do non-interactive, linear, busted things like KCI, like Arclight Phoenix, Splinter Twin will defeat you. It will beat you, you will lose the Splinter Twin, and then you're going to have to adjust how you play the game and how you play Modern. You're going to have to need a way to interact with it, and you're going to have to pay attention more and think more about your deck building, and I think that's good for Modern. I don't think it's likely, but there is some percentage in the universe where we get a world where Splinter Twin becomes unbanned and it's freed onto the format and unleashed, and I think it would be great. Personally, if Splinter Twin and Stoneforge were unbanned, probably would be fine, and I would probably just pick Twin up again. Twin is one of the funnest decks I've ever played in that format, and I've had a lot of fun when I was playing it, and it's a card that means a lot to me in that when I first started getting into Modern, I was looking to play one deck. They banned the cards from it, and then I was like, well, Twin. I will play Twin, I will learn Twin, I will put all my time and effort into Twin. And then that got banned too, and that one hurt a lot because I had more fun playing that deck. Not likely, but possible. So that's Modern. Changes are not bound to happen, but I think more likely than not. Obviously, if they don't make any changes, it's whatever. Modern's still going to be a pretty boring format, at least to me personally. But I have other ways to play Magic, so I'm not that concerned. The one I wanted to save for last is Standard, and now we're getting to a lengthy video. We're at 17 minutes in now. Standard. The format has been great. Ever since the rotation and Guilds of Ravnica has come out, Standard has been the best Standard there has been in like 3 to 4 years. Since the Magic Origins, Khans of Tarkir block era. That Standard was good. This Standard is maybe even a little better. Maybe even a little more diverse because there's not like Siege Rhino running around everywhere. The deck choices are not infinite, but wide enough where you could always find something that you enjoy doing, which I'm a big fan of. The interaction of the format is very good, very high level. There are multiple viable aggro decks, there are multiple viable control decks, there's tempo decks, there's a good handful of mid-range interactive decks. It's a lot of fun. This is where my tinfoil hat theory is coming into play. The new set, Ravnica Allegiance, looks like a whole lot of fun. It brings a lot of lands into play, the other half of the shock lands, and a lot of great gold cards into play that are going to allow people to play any combination of any amount of colors that they want and have something of a viable deck. So the experimentation is going to be excellent out the gate. However, Ravnica Allegiance also brings a problem to Standard, I believe. And it's not a problem yet because we haven't seen it yet, but there's a card in Ravnica Allegiance that interacts with a card that's been in Standard for a little bit now that I think could be a terrible and toxic sort of combination for Standard the way we know it. And it could be something that can completely downgrade Standard from a fun, interactive, interesting, diverse format to an insanely busted and obnoxious to play against deck and everybody else trying to beat it. And that card is Wilderness Reclamation. Hear me out. Those who don't know, it's 3 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you get to untap all your lands. There's another card in Standard called Nexus of Fate. There was a deck based around Nexus of Fate last year before rotation. That was a Bant-colored deck that basically slowed the game down to essentially a point where you can't do anything, and then they eventually start taking turn after turn after turn with Nexus of Fate. And then they eventually create a loop, and then either you mill yourself out just naturally drawing cards, or they ultimate a Teferi and exile all your permanents, and at the very, very best case scenario, you get to go to a draw, and at the very worst case scenario, you don't get to play Magic, and you scoop your cards up and move on to the next round. That deck was annoying, but it wasn't unbeatable, and when Guilds of Ravnica came out, it kind of went away for a little bit. Wilderness Reclamation interacts with Nexus of Fate in a very strange way, where you can, on turn 4, play your Reclamation, or even turn 3 if you have ramp spells to get to it. Then on your end step of your next turn, you can float all your mana, untap it, add more mana, Nexus of Fate. So you could start taking extra turns by like turn 4 reasonably, turn 5 probably consistently, and beyond that, for sure, 100% it's happening. This is going to lead to a lot of not fun Magic, and this is where my tinfoil hat comes in, that maybe before this interaction is allowed into Standard, something needs to happen, and Nexus of Fate's gotta go. It leads to very frustrating gameplay, very unfun gameplay, and even though I have played with the card, I've played Nexus of Fate in like Jeskai control shells and stuff in Standard, and I've had fun casting it. Trying to abuse it and just play it over and over and over and over again is really bad for a format where people, especially your like flagship entry level format, where it's supposed to be interesting and fun for players and interactive and widely enjoyed. It's the sort of interaction like Saheeli Ryan Felidar Guardian or like Aetherworks Marvel and Eni Eldrazi can become an oppressive, unfun, format-ruining combination of cards. And I think Wilderness Reclamation in and of itself is probably fine. It's very powerful, but probably fine. But with the ability to take infinite turns is pretty bad. And I don't know if you ban your uncommon from your new set before your new set's even Standard legal, or you just nuke the buy a box promo that people already didn't like. So that's my tinfoil hat theory. There are already deck lists, and I have like been tinkering myself a little bit and have played in playtesting against a little bit of decks that can very rapidly take infinite turns and just mill you out of the game. There's a Bant colored mill deck that does this. I forget the name of it. There's another enchantment that whenever you cast a blue spell, target player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. So it basically slammed Reclamation early and started casting Nexus of Fates until it milled itself enough to where you're always drawing Nexus of Fate, either by naturally drawing it or using Search for Azcanta to dig for it and go infinite that way. And then once you've milled yourself enough to keep going, you just mill out your opponent. I played against that deck and it was good. It was really good. So Nexus of Fate, tinfoil hat theory, and Standard could be and maybe should be banned in Standard before this occurs. I think it's better to do it now before people invest their time and money in figuring out how to beat it or buy the cards to play with this combo. Either way, that's all I've got to say. How right was I? How wrong was I? If you're watching this later on, anything you guys would add or other cards that I missed or formats you would like to talk more about, do so down in the comments below. It's been a long time. I'm glad to be back to talk to you guys a little bit. I'm going to try to maybe go once a week posting again. But that's that. Thank you guys. I will leave some links down here. There will be a icon up here somewhere to subscribe if you haven't. I know we've lost some of you in the absence that I've had, but here we are. Welcome back, and I'll talk to you guys soon.